Hello, welcome to American Literature. Today we are discussing Jack London, his story To Build a Fire, and the time period genre naturalism. Let's start at the beginning. Jack London is born in 1876, so almost at the end of Reconstruction after the Civil War. He dies in 1916. He published To Build a Fire in 1908. But it is about the Klondike Gold Rush of 1898 and 1899. So this is the setting of To Build a Fire. It is in the Yukon Territory, which is in Canada. But during this gold rush, hundreds of thousands of people rushed up into Canada and through the Yukon Territory into Alaska in the hopes of discovering gold so that they could get rich quick. So if you want to link that to ideas of American mythology, you want to think about what it means that Jack London is living in an economy where there are literally hundreds of thousands of people who are willing to drop everything and risk their lives for the chance to get rich quick. Okay, this is a gold rush, a search for gold. At its peak, about 35,000 people lived in a single city in the Yukon Territory alone. Think about what that means in 1898 and 1899. That is a lot of people. There were similar gold rushes in Nome, Alaska in 1898 and in Fairbanks, Alaska in 1899. So these are the settings. This is the very recent history for the 1908 readers of To Build a Fire. Okay, so when you read To Build a Fire, this is what I want you to keep in mind. I want you to make note of everything the man knows. And I want you to make note of everything the dog knows. I want you to think about how they know that. Through learning, or through instinct, or through something else. Okay, I also want you to notice whenever Jack London mentions imagination. These ideas are basically going to drive our discussion together. You have a definition of naturalism, but the highlights of naturalism are essentially, remember, the Romantics wanted to be realer than the Neoclassicists. The realists wanted to be realer than the Romantics. The naturalists want to be realer than the realists. Okay, realists are writing about ethical problems and middle-class people. Naturalists are writing about problems of survival and the very lowest classes of people. Okay, think servants, think slaves. Huckleberry Finn is a story about a runaway slave. You probably cannot get lower than that unless you are also Huck Finn, who is an orphan who believes himself to be penniless and at the time is also a fugitive from the law for the crime of helping a runaway slave. These are the topics naturalists write about. Naturalists also think about what we would call now Darwinism. They think about the idea of fate and how where you have been born, when you have been born, and who you are genetically determines your fate. Okay, so they think that all of this cancels out any idea of the possibility of equality, of success, of shared wealth, especially when you're thinking about the American dream. So think about the idea of being born a black person in America in the 1800s. This determines your fate almost as much as anything. Think about whether you are born a slave or free. Think, for instance, about whether or not you are born a woman in Afghanistan, where you may never be given an education and you might be actually murdered or mutilated for just trying to get an education. Okay, think about being born gay in medieval England. Okay, think how much that limits your opportunities, where you are and who you are. For this reason, the naturalists tend to be a real drag to read. Their stories are almost universally depressing. The Final thing you need to remember about naturalists is another reason their stories are kind of boring to read is because they tend to be formulaic. They almost all sort of have a plot like this. If you take person A with B characteristics and you put him in C environment, then just like an algebraic equation, you will end up with D result. Okay, so everything is determined by who you are, when and where you are, and what happens to you. Okay, so the stories tend to be awfully formulaic, kind of dull. What you need to know about Jack London and how he takes these ideas and makes them into stories is that Jack London is a socialist. Okay, he believes in the community, in society. All right. Don't get too confused with the idea between that and communism as we know it today. Communism or Marxism in Jack London's time is quite different, though there are still social interruptions during his time that are very similar to the social interruptions, disruptions that we are experiencing now. Okay. So Jack London is a naturalist. He is also a social Darwinist. Okay, he believes that who you are, where you are, determines your fate. Okay, but he also believes that there are things that can change your fate, and we're going to talk about that in class. Okay, so again, I want you to remember to take note of when you are reading To Build a Fire, things the man knows, things the dog knows, things that they learn. Okay? That's all I have for you. Have a great day.